Good evening. Good evening, Lake Forest City Council. Good evening, Lake Forest City Council. Can I have a motion to appoint Alderman Notes as Mayor Pro Tem?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Joyce. Welcome to the Monday, June 16th, 2025 session of Lake Forest City Council. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Notes.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderman Powers.
Here.
Alderman Levert.
Here.
Alderman Weber.
Here.
Alderman Waller.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Notes, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Joyce. If you'll join me as able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, go the other way.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the report of or comments by the mayor, and there are none this evening. Next item on our agenda are comments from our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of City Council. Good evening. I have two items under my report tonight. First, I'd like to welcome to the podium Croya manager Todd DeHigian, who is here to introduce this year's winner of the Margot Martino Spirit of Croya essay contest, which was announced during their Croya Awards ceremony last month. And I'll just say before I turn it over to Todd, that, you know, having the chance to read these and usually hear them in person, I'm always amazed by the maturity of our Croya students, and I want to recognize the staff that are here. We have Catherine and Leslie as well as Todd, and I think, you know, hopefully they've played some small part in developing the students that we have in Croya. And so I always look forward to this event. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd to introduce this year's winner.
Fabulous. Mayor Pro Tem and Alderman, this is a tremendous honor. Thank you for having us here tonight. We always appreciate being able to tell you a little bit about what Croya is doing and then have our student that won our contest read their essay. We have a really exciting few items for you tonight. I'd like to start off just by sharing with you some highlights, our performance measurements that we keep track of. Some of the main things that we talk about is how many programs and meetings we're doing with youth from 7th grade through high school each year. And the average or the goal that we've set over many, many years is about 300 programs and meetings that we've done throughout the year. Last year, it was somewhere around 370. This year, we're at 381. I think we're going to have to change the goal because we have begun doing a number of things that are pretty intense and programs I'll explain in a minute that have really got us on the move. We also have a goal of about 7,000 participants for these meetings and programs, and we were well over 8,000 participants this year. Our after-school drop-in goal is to have about 3,000 students. That's the after-school hours from 3:30 to 5:30 each day throughout the school year, and we had over 3,300. So we're definitely on the roll as far as how many kids are coming. The programs and the meaning behind the programs is really what makes Croya what it is. At first, I always tell people that kids come for the music and the fun and the pizza, and then they stay to get to know our staff, they make friends, they have a lot of fun, and they appreciate that there's some meaning behind what we're doing. I don't think I've ever brought a video here, but I'd like to show you one of the things that we did recently called The Meltdown. Any of you are welcome to come next year when we do this event. All right, so that was our Meltdown fun event. We do a lot of videos that go on social media. I thought it'd be fun to show you guys that tonight. We have a ton of other fun social programs that we do throughout the year. These are pictures from our Donut Bowl and Donut Cup that we play with the police department, and we had huge attendance this year. Really excited about how that program has gone. 26 years standing for the Donut Bowl football and 22 years standing for the Donut Cup floor hockey. Our next program that we really highlight is Lake Forest Days. Left is the parade, right is the band jam. We'll be out there on August 5th and 6th with the parade and the band jam at West Park. Just as always, we bring a lot of kids that are part of our Battle of the Bands, which was just recently, and the winning bands get the opportunity to play in the show. We also had a new program just this spring called the Girls Night In instead of Girls Night Out. A middle school group of girls was disappointed with how the behavior of the boys was at the previous dance in the fall, and they said, we'd like an event just for the girls. So our female staff and a bunch of the girls, how many did we have? 50 kids on a Friday night come hang out at Croya and spend time doing lots of fun stuff that the girls wanted to do. So we're kind of trying to listen, as always, as to what the kids are interested in, the fun things that they want to do, and what's meaningful for them. These are pictures from our our retreats that we did, one in the fall, one in the spring. These are the kinds of activities that really bond students together. We create support groups among friends and peers so that if kids are struggling with issues, they know who to go to, as we know that kids are going to go to their friends before they're going to go to adults. That's why Croya works so well, but they also know that if they have a struggle that is more serious, that our adults are there to be supportive as well. This was our work trip that just got back on Friday. It was a group of young ladies that went to Macomb, Illinois. They dug some holes for some fence posts, did some power washing, landscaping, cleaning up of a whole bunch of different areas of people's homes, and then also went to an animal shelter where they got to walk dogs that really needed to be walked because they're not being given the attention that they need. And of course, that was a highlight of the trip. This was our pink party back in the winter when we were doing support for the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and where we sell t-shirts and have a bunch of activities that really support this charity. This was started by one of our Croya students who's now in college, whose mother passed away from breast cancer, and we've tried to kept it as a tradition. Here's the most recent Battle of the Bands pictures. We had a number of bands that came and played. We had a full house at Croya. It's real exciting to be able to use our own facility and the stage that we have at Croya to be able to do some pretty amazing things. These kids, a number of these kids will be playing at Lake Forest Day. The top left corner, Liam Sheridan will be on the float for 4th of July. He was the winner of the Battle of Bands this year. Our poinsettia sale, youth sold over $13,000 in plants. And between the user fees and donations that we have, the kids provide for the things that we do that aren't free. Most of what we do is free to local residents. We raised over $60,000 in user fees and donations. And then we had the Heart of Croya fundraiser in February, where we raised close to $40,000 in a matter of hours. And that total put toward money that we've raised in the last couple years means we have close to $125,000 now earmarked for the Croya Kitchen renovation project. And the quotes are coming in for design and engineering, and we are more than excited. The facility at Croya also has a number of groups throughout the year that rent the space to use for different parties and programs, and our rental income was over $6,000 this year. So we're pretty excited about how things are going. This was our recognition dinner this year, where the new students, who are the executives, took the oath of office, led by Kate Lee, our outgoing chairman, who's here tonight. And I'd like her to bring up a bag of T-shirts to give to Mr. Wisha that any of you guys can have. Last year we didn't bring enough, and there were other people that were interested, like the city clerk, the attorney, the city manager. There are more than enough shirts this year, and we'd like you guys to be able to have one, and we'll check in with City Hall once you guys pick which ones you like. On the right, there's a giant check that was made out to Michaela Berry, who's our winner of the essay contest this year, funded through the Croya Foundation. Michaela Berry served this year as the Croya Service and Leadership Chairwoman on the executive committee. She was also a retreat leader both her junior and senior year and one of our most involved students. Really proud to have her come up tonight and read her essay. Michaela, come on up.
Hi everyone, I'm Michaela. Okay. Should I talk in this microphone? Okay. Okay. Croya is like a breath of fresh air. People often say that they need to step outside or go get a breath of fresh air, and that is exactly what Croya has been for me. For 4 years now, in the midst of hectic school weeks filled with sports, homework, stress, and drama, Croya has always been my breath of fresh air. No matter the meeting, Wednesday nights have become my favorite time of the week, and for 4 years, I've breathed in the sweet Croya air every single Wednesday. As I reflect on Croya as a whole, I think about everything that it has taught me. This is everything that I've been breathing in these past 4 years. Taking a deep breath in, I recognize all that I have learned. I have learned the knowledge of the upperclassmen that I have watched. All of the Croya kids that I have met and become close with have not only become my best friends, but have taught me so much about living. Specifically, they have showed me what it means to be a high schooler in Lake Forest and how I can leave my mark on our community. I've breathed in and learned the lessons of peer training and what it means to be a good friend. My freshman and sophomore year, I took peer training over and over again with different groups of kids just because of how much fun I was having. I continuously learned how unconditional positive regard can truly change your outlook on life and on those around you. My sophomore year, I was elected to the Croya High School Executive Board, and as the youngest at those meetings, I learned how incredible it was to have your voice heard in our community. Leading retreats my junior year and continuing my journey on exec, Croya taught me everything I know about being a leader. I breathed in and learned lessons from my leader partners and adult chaperones, as I hoped that I was making the retreats as amazing as I could. Attending Croya Work Trip, I learned how important it is to stay involved in community service, and learned all about giving back and what a difference it can make in the lives of others. I'm so lucky to have been able to breathe in all that Croya has to offer. As I am at the end of my Croya high school journey, I can't help but let all of my air out and hope that I have given to Croya a fraction of what it has given me. Breathing out, I am able to reflect on how I have poured my heart into Croya, being sure to carve the time out of my week, specifically for 7 to 8 on Wednesday nights, has been the easiest decision. I hope that my presence meant something to Croya kids over these 4 years, and that giving my presence and energy every week helped keep the spirit of Croya alive and well. Juggling exec meetings and leading 3 retreats, adding the time slot of 5:30 to 7, followed by 7 to 8 got trickier, but knowing that every time I walked into Croya, I could take a deep breath is what kept me coming back. Honored to be a retreat leader, giving back to younger Croya kids has been simply the best. It feels as though I am passing on my Croya knowledge, and I couldn't be happier. Spending a week in the summer for 2 years in Macomb, Illinois was oh so great. Giving my time, service, and energy to help a community less fortunate than us is something that I wouldn't trade for the world. Everything that I'm breathing out are the things I was so lucky to have given Croya. I can only hope that as I take this deep breath and let all of my air out, I'm giving Croya passion. As I watch the older Croya kids lead and run meetings, their passion for Croya quickly spread over me. I hope that I can give younger Croya kids the same passion I have, so that the youth of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff can keep breathing in the sweet Croya air.
Thanks, Michaela. We're excited that she was able to come tonight and be here with us. Wanted to say thank you again to the City Council. It's 45 years that Croya has been alive, and we are very excited. One of the things that Michaela referred to was our peer training class. This year was the first school year ever that we were brought in during what's called Scout Seminar. It's like a freshman advisory program. We were able to peer train 80 students during the school year, and they're mandating this freshman advisory program called Scout Seminar for over 300 freshmen starting in August. And they have asked Croya to do peer training for all 300 students. So this is a huge win for us. It's a major mark in the development of our relationship with the high school, and we're really excited. Also excited to be able to say Alderman Weber is going to be our new liaison to City Council, and I worked with her brother back in the day with Battle of the Bands, and so there's a lot of history. If you have any questions, I can definitely answer them. Otherwise, we're all set.
Go ahead, Richard.
I have a question for Michaela. Michaela, where will you continue your education next year, and what will you decide to study?
I'm going to Fairfield University in Connecticut, and I'm studying communications.
Well, very good. Congratulations.
Todd, this is one of the most wonderful nights, of the year on our calendar to hear whoever you've chosen that particular year to read their essay. And it's a testament, never disappointed on just the character and quality of the kids that you have in your program, and have the opportunity to be recognized with their hard work on their essays. Thank you.
That's an honor. Thank you so much.
Any other? Right.
I'll-
Keep up the good work.
Thanks so much.
Okay, congratulations, Michaela, and thank you to Todd and Leslie and Catherine for being here tonight.
All right. So next item on our agenda is opportunities for residents.
Actually, no, sorry, I have one more item. I was just allowing to leave.
Byron, I'm not letting off look that easy.
That's all right, yeah. I didn't know if the Croya students would hear about the bridge project, so I was giving them a minute.
Right, thank you.
But
Byron's setting a record. This is
Yeah.
his fifth meeting in a row he gets to present.
yes, he's been kept busy, but he's also here with some very good news to report. So I think, as the council recalls, at your November Capital Workshop, we had a pretty robust conversation about the Lake Woodbine Bridge project. It is the most critical bridge project in the city. It had been budgeted last year and was originally scheduled for construction in the current calendar year, but as you recall, the project came in significantly over budget. That sent us back to the drawing board a little bit. But with that, again, Byron has, I think, good news to share for the council. And so I'm going to turn it over to him and then remind the council that we are looking for some consensus and direction as to how to proceed, but no formal action is required tonight. Thanks.
Byron, thank you.
All right, good evening. Thank you for the introduction, Manager Wisha. As he mentioned, I will be giving an update on the Lake Woodbine Bridge. We talked about this project a few times last year. Manager Wisha mentioned the Finance Committee meeting back in November, at which time we were given direction to solicit for additional grant funding. Before that, going back to August, is when we received the bidding results. So with this being a federally funded project, the state, IDOT, bid out the project, and we received a number much higher than we were expecting back in August. So there's updates basically going back to August, and I'll update you of kind of what has changed since then. So ultimately, I'll be presenting two options for direction tonight. One being the current bridge, which is precast. I'll explain that. That would be a construction schedule of 2026. And then there's a second option, which would be changing the design to a cast in place, which would have a different construction schedule of either 2027 or 2028. There's a few variables to kind of think of as you kind of go through your decision-making process tonight. I'll reiterate those in a minute, or I'll bring those up throughout the presentation, but I want to mention them quickly here. So the existing bridge condition, the bridge is over 100 years old. I'll go into that a little bit. Time, and then cost. So first, a grant update. There's good news on that front. So as you may remember, we had an existing grant of $1.945 million from what they call the Illinois Special Bridge Program. We had applied for that grant 3 or 4 years ago. And then when we solicited for additional grant funding last year, we actually solicited through the same program, ISBP, did not get that grant, but at the same time we got the grant rejection letter, we got a grant award letter for a different fund. So basically IDOT found a different state fund that they have for the amount of $1.735 million. And it can be used as a match or what they call like an overmatch. So the money has a lot of flexibility depending on where the actual project cost lands. So total available grant funding is now $3.68 million to be paid by others. So that's really good news. So going into the background, I'll go through this pretty quickly. I know we went through this in more detail in November. As I mentioned a minute ago, the bridge is over 100 years old. The scope is full removal and replacement. We bid it in August, as I mentioned. The low bid was just over $3.9 million with 10% contingency added. It was $4.355 million. And just to give you some context, at that time, that was $1.7 million over the available budget combined grant and local funds. I want to mention the McLennan Reed Bridge. The reason why I want to mention that is as you make your decision, I just want to remind everyone that in the past, the City Council basically agreed with the direction to rehabilitate that bridge at the same time as we do Lake Woodbine. The reason being it's just a couple blocks away, and similar to the approach we're taking down the street here with Bank Lane and Deer Path, it's kind of the approach of bundling those projects at the same time, so we're minimizing the disturbance into 1 year as opposed to like back-to-back years. So that project, that funding is in fiscal year 27. That funding would be available in May of 2026. We'll have a chance with that project to update the budget this coming September and October as it's fiscal year 27, as I just mentioned. Now talking about this project, which is also fiscal year 27, so we'll also have a chance to update the budget for that in September, October. The budget that I show now is $4.9 million, and I just want to emphasize some updates and some revisions for transparency as the numbers have changed a little bit going back to August, and then they changed a little bit November, and now we've kind of updated them again with the additional grant being received. So $4.9 million roughly available total. The grant amount is now $3.68 million, which I mentioned in the previous slide. The local amount, I wanted to go into that a little bit. So we show $1.21 million of local funds. So basically during the last budget process, we went ahead and updated that amount. That being said, as I mentioned a minute ago, it's fiscal year 27, meaning it's not appropriated yet. Depending on your decision tonight, we can update those numbers as needed in September and October as we go through that budget process. Also, kind of staying on that note, with it being fiscal year 27, those funds actually will not be available until May 1st of 2026. So depending on the direction, we may actually have to advance that funding, for any construction that would cost that we would incur before that. So like if we started construction, let's say in January, we would need to have some funding for January, February, March, April. So now I want to just go through some common considerations. So basically, I just want to simplify your decision making, let you know kind of what's common in between both options. First, I want to go a little bit into the differences and just kind of remind everyone the difference between precast and cast in place. Both of these options, either one precast or cast in place, they will meet IDOT standards. They will both, be structurally sound. There's just some nuances when it comes to, how it's constructed and cost and time and stuff like that. So precast, what that basically means is as opposed to building the bridge and actually pouring the concrete like in place, you're basically building it or pouring the concrete off-site at like a factory where it's temperature controlled, there's no weather, right? There's no rain, where you're basically pouring the concrete into sections, letting it cure in that temperature controlled area. And then once it's cured, about a month, they would bring the sections on site. Cast in place is quite a bit different, where they basically build formwork over the ravine, most likely with wood or some other material, and basically pour the concrete in place. They do that for lots of different structures, but there are, different variables with that. With the concrete being poured outside, obviously it's subject to the weather and temperature. So that's just a little bit of a background for the differences between those. Now looking at similarities of kind of what to think through for your decision making. The existing bridge condition is just something to take into account in general. So I did reach out to WJE, who is our bridge program manager. They have been for five-ish years. The Lake Woodbine Bridge is on an annual inspection cycle. So other bridges in our inventory are normally like 2 or 3 years. This one I think is the only bridge currently. Ringwood may actually be every year now, but it's basically inspected every year. So I talked to them several times. They inspected it in May, and basically they said that their confidence is decreasing over time. And basically the way that the structural engineer explained it to me is it's in the categories. And currently we're in like the second to lowest category. And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he basically said if there's like in the next inspection next year, if there's one more like distress condition, like a new crack or area of distress that's formed, that would most likely lower us into what they call the serious condition. And then once you're in the serious condition, if there was another additional distress condition discovered after that, at that point, you're potentially looking at doing like temporary shoring to shore the bridge up, or you're looking at like load postings, like reducing it again, or like the size of trucks that can go over it, or like a worst case scenario, you'd be looking at a closure potentially. So I just want to put that out just as some background to kind of take into account the existing bridge condition as you look through the options. The service life of both designs, they both have or will go through the IDOT process. They'll be rated for a service life of 75 years. Both options will have the same decorative railings, which was really one of the larger points of contention or maybe interest from the residents. So they're equal on that front in terms of the railing style that the residents really liked. And then the budget for both is the same. And then now kind of looking at the differences a little bit. So this slide is to kind of walk you through comparing the pros and the cons of both bridges as you make the decision. So here today, I'm only looking at the two options that I kind of alluded to earlier. If you remember back at the Finance Committee, we were actually looking at 4 options. The reason we're only presenting 2 is now that we've received that additional grant, the direction was to basically now see if we'd be able to fund the project, the current bridge design, either through precast or a cast in place. And with the cast in place option, the bridge will still look the same. It'll be a spandrel arch. There may be some like tiny dimensional changes, but nothing that would substantially change it. It's really just like the mechanics of the bridge that would be different. Mostly more from a design standpoint and a construction standpoint, as I mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to kind of walk you through real quick, line by line. So the second column is option 1. That's the current bridge, the precast. And then the far right column is option 2, which would be redesigning the current bridge to a cast-in-place construction type. So from a construction duration standpoint, talked to several people, contractors, designers, structural engineers. There's a little bit of nuance to this question because with the precast, some of it's like built on off-site. So it's like, do you count that time as duration or not? Either of these options or both of these options are built within one construction season. I might be able to say one's 1 week quicker or not. For the intents and purposes of tonight, we're just saying the construction duration's the same because I think to me, they're both within a construction season, which I think is the most important thing. From a longevity standpoint, they're both designed for 75 years, as I mentioned earlier. The reason why I'm saying slightly more for the precast is it's just going back to the fact that with it being poured and cured in a temperature-controlled environment, there is basically more predictability of performance, and there's a chance that it would be more like durable longer than the cast in place. That being said, the cast in place, I say slightly less, but it's still a longevity or service life of 70 years, 75 years. It's just potentially potentially a little bit shorter than the precast, as the precast may outlive that 75 years potentially. In terms of appearance, I'm saying the precast is potentially more consistent. Again, that's just going back to the fact that it's temperature controlled where the concrete is cured, so the color may just be a little bit more consistent throughout. From a construction standpoint, now this is one of the variables I mentioned in the very beginning, like time. So this is kind of one of the important ones is with the precast, we have initial direction, or we have direction from IDOT that if we get direction tonight to proceed with this, that we would be able to get on the September letting, what they call letting. I know my boss likes to call it a bid opening, but if we get on that in September, we would be able to start construction in January. So that is something, January of 2026, so that's something important to note. Now with the option 2, I'm saying 2027, and that would be the best case scenario. I think it's pretty likely, but I also want to say it 2028 is possible as well. So the reason I say that is once we change the design that much, they'll basically push us back to what they call pre-final design. And at that point, it'll go back down to the Central Bridge office, and they can make a lot of comments, and there's a potential that they may actually give it back to the State Historic Preservation Office. And at that point, just to make sure that it matches the character of the original bridge in which we received the design approval. And at that point, it's kind of out of our hands when it goes to the State Historic Preservation Office. Even when I call my IDOT contacts, they are unable to call SHPO directly. So it's like, once you give it to them, it could be 6 months, it could be a year. So there's just a little bit of risk with that, but I just want to point that out. So that would be 2027 best case scenario, 2028 potentially as well. Now looking at cost for each, I just want to emphasize this is estimated. I got the information from a combination of the design engineer, recent bid tabs that are available on the IDOT website, as well as calling a contractor that bids on similar projects to this. So for the precast project, we're saying $5 million with the 10% contingency, and I'm sure you're thinking that sounds a lot higher than the number that we talked about in August and November, and I'll go into that a little bit in the next slide. So $5 million, including the 10% contingency. It says design 7,500. Really what that is basically just getting through the remaining comments to get on the letting with IDOT, and I'm not including it in the math there simply due to the fact that that 7,500 can be paid through the contingency from the existing design contract. So no need to include it in the math. That budget's already been encumbered. Now looking at option 2 to the right, the construction there, it's $4.8 million. So potentially $200,000 less than the $5 million. But again, these are just estimates. At the end of the day, there's a lot that can change by the time if we bid out option 1, certainly by the time we bid out option 2. But right now, as it stands, the consensus I'm getting is there's a potential for $200,000 worth of savings. But by the time we wait a year or two, there's also the potential that those savings could be canceled out by inflation. So that's $4.8 million with 10% contingency, as I just mentioned. With that, though, we have to add design. So it may not seem like a big change because, as I mentioned earlier, the actual geometry of the bridge is mostly the same, but the mechanics of the bridge is quite a bit different. A fair amount of the plan set has to be revised, new specifications added. So that estimate for design is $75,000. So basically, by the time you add in the design, the potential savings between the two is actually not $200,000. It might be closer to $125,000. Going back to option 1 real quick, one thing I forgot to mention, in the bottom cost column, I mentioned the Lake Forest funding gap for option 1. Simply what I'm trying to say there, it's based off of that estimate with contingency of $5 million. We would still potentially need another $105,000 if it actually bids out at that number. So basically, if it comes in at that number in September, I would have to ask for an additional $105,000 in that fiscal year 27 budget cycle. But again, subject to bids in the market. So now going back to option 2, currently there's no funding gap for that. If the project actually bid out, similar to that cost estimate, we would have enough funding based off of the numbers that I showed you earlier. So in summary of both of those options, I guess the real quick way to think of each is the precast, potentially a little more expensive, but you're constructing it in 2026. The other option, the cast in place, potentially we might save $125,000, $150,000, $200,000 if we're lucky, but potentially we're delaying the project an additional year or two compared to the precast. So now looking at kind of the same information, more visually, what I wanted to show here is basically show the what's changed since the August 2nd bid to this June 16th estimate. So looking at the title of each chart, you'll notice that the August 2nd bid with 10% contingency was $4.3 million. Now, if you look at the right chart, you see it's $5 million. So it's gone up quite a bit. And none of this is probably a surprise to anyone. you know, we looked at a lot of different information. We looked at some bridges that are smaller, some are bigger. There's some bridges in the city of Chicago that have gone up like they've doubled in like a year based off of where they estimated and where it bid out. So we're trying to be conservative, but not overly conservative because we don't want to affect the decision-making process that you're making tonight. But really where I think the difference between the 4.3 million on the left, the actual bid number, and then the 5 million to the right is it's a combination of inflation, market volatility, and then tariffs. I mean, there's a little bit of tariffs with this, even though it's mostly concrete. The concrete really price hasn't fluctuated to the degree of steel, but there's still some uncertainty in the market. So those costs have gone up, as I mentioned, about the estimate has gone up about $600,000 to $700,000. That being said, even with that increase since last year, now that we've received the additional grant, the percentages that the city would be paying are actually going down, which is a good thing. So basically, if you look at the right pie chart, and I'm going to do a little bit of math here. So the additional funds required in gray at 40%, and then the budget amount at that time of 15%. We were looking at about 55% of the project was being paid for by Lake Forest local funding. Now looking at the right, even though the project cost has gone up, we've received those additional grant funds of 1.7 million. So the percentage has actually gone down. You get the Lake Forest budget amount of 24% plus the additional funds required 2%. We're in the 25% or 26% range. Now putting that into actual numbers, the right or the left side, when we actually bid it out, the amount of actual local funds that the city would have had to pay to build the project back then would have been 2.4 million. Now, with the additional grant money, the actual city funds would be 1.3 million. So the fact that we got another grant has made a big difference. So the right version, again, even though the cost has gone up, we're looking at that being potentially $1.1 million less that the city would pay due to the fact that we've received that grant. So in summary, the bridge would be like 1.3 million, and that would be the precast bridge, and that would be the bridge that went through the 2 or 3 year public input process with our residents. And then now looking at the options that are in front of you tonight, we have option 1, which is the staff recommendation, which is basically moving forward with the current bridge design now that we've received that additional grant. That would be a 2026 construction year, as I mentioned earlier. The next steps for that would basically be staff, me, would bring back required IDOT funding agreements, similar to what we did for Deer Path Streetscape last year. I'd probably bring that back in July 21st, and that's just a necessary step that IDOT needs prior to that September letting. And then the other option would be option 2, which would be the partial redesign of the current bridge from the precast to cast in place, which would be a construction year of either 2027 or 2028. The next steps for that option would be I would bring a design engineering change order to the council, somewhere in the amount of 75 grand, as I mentioned earlier. And then the IDOT funding agreements could probably be next year due to the fact that there would be at least an additional 1 or 2 year delay with that option. So with that, I can take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Ellie?
Thank you. First of all, just want to congratulate you and the department on the additional grant funding. Really excellent to see those dollars come in and be put to work here to support this.
Thank you.
So that's really, really great. You mentioned early on in your presentation that we are looking at the McClellan-Reed Bridge as well. Are you seeing that as a duplicate of this bridge? So when we're talking about this, is it kind of ×2? Am I hearing that correctly, or are you viewing that as a completely separate?
Yeah, so that would be a whole, nothing tonight is being approved for the McClellan-Reed Bridge.
Right.
I think I'm just trying to remind the council that if there was direction tonight to move forward with option 1, that in the background we would start getting stuff ready for McClellan-Reed to probably bid that out in September. with a bid opening at the end of September, so that we have the real bid number, not an estimate, the real bid number to basically bring to the budget meetings in early October and say, hey, we had budgeted 1.9 million, it's now 1.8 million or 2 million, and then we.
Or 5 million. That's what my concern is, that, you know, we kind of look at the, and I know we're not making a decision on that tonight,
Yeah.
but looking ahead, are we saying it's, you know, another 5 million down the road, potentially on another bridge that's going to mimic this? Because I know we talked a lot about design as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the risk for that bridge, I mean, the volatility is a little bit less.
Okay.
I mean, certainly if those costs came in higher, there would be the potential to still say, hey, we're going to split them up, right? Like at that time, if it did become like a cost issue. We did update that number in October. The same thing I say about every project, but we did look at that quite a bit, and I did adjust those numbers. So I'm hoping and fingers crossed that the 1.9 million for rehabilitation is in the right ballpark, which I'm thinking it is. But if it does come in higher, there are options that we can do to, you know, tweak the scope, or like I mentioned a minute ago, we could just simply say, hey, we're unable to do the McLennan Reed, you know, proceed with Lake Woodbine, but then do McLennan Reed another year. That would be an option.
Byron, do you want to just very briefly explain like the differences between the two bridges from a design perspective?
Yeah, so the Lake Woodbine Bridge, I think you're all familiar with. It's a concrete bridge. It's over 100 years old. You know, it has the arches. The McLennan Reed Bridge, I don't have the year with me, but it's certainly not that old. It's more of like a typical highway bridge you would see with like steel. So we're not necessarily removing and replacing it. We are removing the deck and then doing some steel repairs. And then also like the ravines down where the actual piers go in, we would be doing like a lot of stabilization around that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. And then just my comment would be, I would support what the staff recommendation is, if that's what's coming forth from Public Works as well.
Hi, can you just remind everybody where the McLennan Bridge is that you're referring to?
Yeah, so it's just north, 2 or 3 blocks on Lake Road. So it's just north of here, about 3 blocks, 2 or 3 blocks. Sorry, I should have had a map for that one.
Just south of the water treatment plant, for those who were
Correct.
from the tour a couple weeks ago.
Just to share some comments from the Public Works, if you don't mind. You're also in the Public Works. But one of the things that the Public Works Committee and the council as a whole recommended or requested staff do when they came in over budget was, wow, go try to find some more money. That was the first thing. The second thing is the contractor who won that bid, or who submitted the lowest bid, actually communicated to us that had we changed the design, they might be able to come in lower with a lower price. So that would be another opportunity for savings, right? So that's kind of how we started down this track of looking at the Gaston Place Bridge and pursuing the additional funding. City staff has grabbed the funding. We got that taken care of. Now we're faced with making a decision. Do we want to keep going down the path of a cast in place, or do we want to stick with the precast? Now I think our focus changes to risk. If we go down the path of concrete cast in place, we run the risk of getting back in front of SHPO, having more public involvement, and then time, right? This could delay it even farther, and we've got a critical asset right now that needs to be replaced. So right now, our biggest obstacle is risk. The option that presents the least amount of risk is to keep the current design, make it precast. We got the money, and it basically, for all practical purposes, fits within our budget. So I would recommend that we stick with option number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Nancy.
I agree with Alderman Walther. I think going with option 1 and getting this thing done should be the priority, more than $105,000. I would much rather stick with the design plan that we already have, that we've agonized over. The idea of going back to be reviewed and dragging this thing out for another 18 months, the bridge is just going to get worse. And if ultimately what we're doing is adding more stress to it, and for the sake of saving I don't mean to sound so dismissive of it, but for the sake of saving comparatively a little bit of money, I don't think it's worth it. And I'd much rather see us do option one and get this ball rolling and get this thing done.
John.
Thanks, Byron. Appreciate the feedback. I like the simplicity of going from the 4 options to the 2. I'm also in agreement that I think option 1 is our best bet going forward. I think our town and community is dealing with lots of construction, right? And this is just another thing we know that's been teed up, and it's incredibly important. I like the fact that we can control more of the variables to Alderman Walther's position. We can control that much better. And it's more of a now decision and do, as opposed to wait and let more involvement from, you know, I'm not concerned about the community. I'm concerned about IDOT and the state of Illinois more than anything. The last comment I would make that's just more overarching, and City Manager Wisha and I have talked about this before, a lot of these projects come through with this plus or minus 10% or 10% contingency. I know you've done all the work, and Public Works is on top of this daily. I don't know that the community sees the puts and takes of that. And when we're under the 10% contingency, it would be really important to be able to share that with the community on various projects, particularly some that are this meaningful and this large of a spend. So I have no concern whatsoever about it being managed appropriately. I just don't know that you guys have marketed the work that you do, particularly when you're not using the full contingency and those dollars stay in capital improvement fund going forward. So thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Byron.
Of course, thank you.
2 questions that are really just to get it on the record about an answer. And this is not going to change my opinion, because I do believe that that first option, sticking with cast in place, or not cast in place, precast, thank you, is the best option. But if there's a delay, does that put at all risk the grant monies that we've gotten or been able to?
No. So actually most of the grant funding for these projects, so anytime you get money from the state, they basically associate it with like one of their budget years. And usually the budget year they associate it with is like 5 years out. So they've associated with, let's say, I'm kind of spitballing here, but either their federal fiscal year 29 or federal fiscal year 30. And then in the cases like our projects, when they're ready, they actually move it up, which they're able to accommodate. And they're actually pretty good about. So no, if there was a delay, we would still be within that range where I don't think the money would be at risk,
Okay.
if that's what you're asking.
Second part of the question is you looked at alternatives. We really only saw cast in place as the alternative. Was there any other design alternative, for instance, all steel girder under the underside being again, like I'm imagining like an Eiffel Tower or something like underneath instead of a concrete structure.
So thinking back to the 4 options that I mentioned at the Finance Committee would basically be like variations of the 2 options that I mentioned tonight. The third option was basically proceeding with the project without waiting for the grant funding, which we've already passed that, right? So that's kind of a moot point now. And then the 4th option, I think is speaking to what you're saying, is basically it would be redesigning to like more of like kind of, to use the term, like a highway bridge, like a single span steel bridge, which would simply, or would be cheaper potentially. Obviously now with it being more steel, tariffs and stuff like that potentially come into play. That would be potentially 3.5 to like 3.7 million, but with that isn't the design that we got the consensus from the public. And we have not received concurrence from IDOT that the grant applications that we applied for, which were for the Spandau Arch Bridge, that they would transfer it to this new bridge type that we switched. And there wasn't really a way for me to ask that without raising some eyebrows. So potentially there would be savings with that, but like you're looking at almost a complete redesign. I was estimating probably 400,000 and probably like a 2 to 3 year design standpoint, and going back to You know, I was talking about the cast in place going back to like the pre-final level. If we switch to like a steel bridge, we're going back to like the preliminary level. We're like almost as far back as you can in the IDOT review process. So there would be certainly more risk there than even the cast in place from a design and review IDOT standpoint.
Right, I appreciate that. My only sort of parting comment, because it will impact McLennan Reed, is there's the nice to haves and the need to haves. And the public, as they're getting their opinions together and sharing their input, there's the designing, boy, this is what would be great, but now we have to pay for it. And if we're now escalating a budget at the expense of some other important capital item, a new fire truck or a new ambulance or repaving a road that needs to be repaired, those are things we as a city council need to really weigh heavily. And I really have to make the point that the decisions we're making tonight is not going to set the standard for what exactly is going to happen on McLennan Reed, but we're going to keep an open mind on all the alternatives to do that in the most cost-effective way that respects the historical significance of where it is in the community, but again, not losing sight of the importance of the overall budget.
Yeah, I think you may be referring to Ringwood, right?
Oh, Ringwood, yeah.
Ringwood, yes, correct. Yep, we would still, I mean, have to present multiple options to the public, similar to what we did with Lake Woodbine, but certainly there could be, you know, there's some variability, or you know, there is input we can get from the city council of the options that we present for that project. But yeah, speaking to the McLennan Reed, that one being a rehabilitation, that design,
A different factor.
more structurally driven, and they're you know, it did not need to go through that public input process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
I don't have anything else. Is there anyone in the public who would like to add any comments? Okay, I don't see any. Any final discussion before we bring it to a motion?
I have a question.
Please.
Came up for me. So let's say we had I'm going to pick a number. Let's say we had a $4 million project that was budgeted, and then because of reasons like this or whatever, it gets extended for a year, and then we don't spend that money until next year. Are we gaining interest on that money? And when we gain interest on, let's say, $1 million, say we gain 3%, that's $120,000. Does that money stay in that same fund? Does it stay with this project? Or is it used elsewhere within the city? I'm just curious.
Are you referring to grant funding or?
No, I'm talking about, like, if we had budgeted a project for $4 million, all our money,
Okay,
and now we have this $4 million in our bank account, and it gets postponed a year.
Yep.
At the end of the year, I'm going to have an extra $120,000 in interest
right, and so we will get interest and it will stay in the same fund.
in the same fund, but it doesn't necessarily stay with the same project.
No.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just remind the council too that as a matter of practice, most of the city's interest earnings have been allocated towards the capital fund because it's a bit of an unknown variable going into the year. For more volatile revenue sources like that, we shy away from allocating those towards operating budgets, and again, put those towards one-time expenses.
Yeah, thank you.
No, Jason, you're not looking for a vote.
No, all we were looking for was consensus on option 1 or option 2. It seems to be that there's a pretty clear consensus for option 1, so no formal action needed tonight. We'll come back for final approvals later in the year.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Byron.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jason. All right, that brings us back to where I segued earlier. Item number 3 on our agenda is the opportunity for anyone in attendance who might want to address City Council. Do I see anybody? Okay, seeing nobody. Next item on our agenda are committee reports, and Katie Skibb, our Finance Director, will be presenting consideration of the annual appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2026 and approval of rollovers. This is the first reading.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. Tonight, we are requesting your approval of the first reading of the fiscal 26 appropriation ordinance. As you will recall, the City Council approved the budget and comprehensive financial plan in April. The budget serves as the planning and management tool and helps us control spending throughout the city. The appropriation ordinance, on the other hand, is the spending limit, or, is a legal authority that allows the city to spend public funds. So it establishes the maximum spending limits and is required by state statute to be adopted by the end of July and filed with the county clerk within 30 days of approval. So at the July 21st meeting, we will hold a public hearing and present the ordinance for final reading and approval. There are a few key differences between the budget and the appropriation ordinance before you tonight. These are outlined on the schedule on page 14 of your packet and on the screen here in City Council. This shows the approved budget by fund and then walks you through all the adjustments made in the appropriations ordinance to get to the final numbers. A couple of highlights: the debt service payments, while included in the budget, are excluded from the appropriations ordinance. These expenditures are legally authorized through the bond ordinance and adopted at time of issuance. The library is also included in the appropriation ordinance, although it is not included in the city's annual budget. The library board approves its budget independently. And in line with longstanding practices, this ordinance includes a 10% contingency for each fund. This provides the flexibility for any unforeseen expenses without requiring the council to amend the ordinance. However, it is important to emphasize that staff and the council will continue to follow the adopted budget as our operational guide and not the fully appropriated amount. School District 67 will also be included due to its special charter. Although District 67 does not follow the appropriation process and adopts its own budget, we are required to formally include their budget in the city's appropriation ordinance. The District 67's budget is not included in tonight's first reading, but will be incorporated into the final reading in July. And then lastly, we also include rollover amounts with the final reading. These represent projects that were approved in the prior fiscal year that either were not started or were not completed by the year end. By including them in this ordinance ensures that the fiscal year 26 budget is accurate and reflects the true timing of expenses. In July, you'll receive a detailed schedule of all the rollover amounts by project and by vendor as part of the final ordinance. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, I request approval of the first reading of the fiscal 26 appropriation ordinance.
Thank you, Kitty. Any questions? I don't see any. Anyone in the public who has any questions? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of the fiscal year 2026 appropriation ordinance?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Is this a roll call vote? Yeah. Okay. Starting, are you calling the roll? Okay.
Alderman Novit? Aye. Alderman Clemmons?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Powers?
Aye.
Alderman Levert?
Aye.
Alderman Weber?
Aye.
Alderman Walther?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda, our Assistant Public Works Director, Jim Lockefeller, was going to present his recommendation for approval to waive the public bid process and approve a 5-year recycling material processing agreement with Lakeshore Recycling Systems for the sum of $650,000. Jim.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. I did prepare just a few short slides on the topic this evening, and just to dive right in here, since 2008, all city collected recycling materials, whether it's at the curb or at the compost center, have been transported to a material recovery facility. The acronym's MRF, but in the industry, it's actually a MRF. And for us, we've held our agreement since 2008 with Resource Management out in Chicago Ridge, about 50 miles south of here. And so specific to curbside collection, the recycle haulers here in town are city employees. After they complete their route, they head to the compost center. That is where we have what's referred to as a transfer ramp. They unload the truck there, and then that employee loads it's a truck trailer from Resource Management. They drop off about 4 a week. They pack that up, and it's just that cycle where Resource Management drops off a trailer and picks up that full one. And so it's been a very positive relationship with Resource Management, again, stemming back to 2008. But in December of 2024, they let us know that they were pivoting from the single stream recycling service. They're moving away from that. They formalized that in March of 2025, where just a few months ago, they terminated their agreement because of that business model change, but they've been very helpful along the way. And so why we're here tonight is with that agreement formally ending in July, city staff, Public Works, began to negotiate with 2 companies in Lake County, really 2 that have the largest MRFs here, Lakeshore Recycling Systems and Groot Industries. And now that is different. That negotiation process is different from the traditional bid process. But we have precedent that stems back actually to 2014. We did it in 2017, more specifically to landfill, garbage. And it was former Mayor Jim Cowie, who worked with Mike Thomas, Dan Martin at the time. His professional background is in this industry, and he made it very clear to say, when you negotiate these sorts of agreements in this business, you don't do the traditional bid process. What that does is it immediately elevates it to more of their corporate offices versus what we were able to do, and it held true this time too. We negotiated with the people that manage these local facilities, and we think it turned out incredibly well. And then lastly on the slide there, over the past 3 years, we've averaged about 2,500 tons of recyclable materials to Resource Management. And why that's important is because that is where the fee ultimately stems from. It's the cost per ton. And on this slide here, I'm going to walk you through the chart. Dana was very helpful in color coding this to make it easy to hopefully follow along. And where it really starts, and you'll see we have the 2 firms there, Lakeshore Recycling Systems, LRS is what they're known in the industry, so you might hear me reference them a few times, and then Groot. And it starts with that blue column, the recycling processing fee. That is simply a fixed fee that allows them to be competitive. And that includes their labor, their overhead, their equipment. It's what they're charging us per ton. In this case, LRS was about $6 cheaper than Groot Industries at $84 a ton versus the $90 a ton. And again, that's a fee they're charging us per ton. And then the next factor that comes into play is the current market pricing, or simply put, what is our material worth? And that's dynamic pricing. That does change monthly. Paper can cost X in May, and now in June it's going to cost Y. There's market conditions with what drives that value. But for the sake of the presentation this evening, we are holding $50 per ton there. And again, that's market pricing, although it can change monthly. Where the pricing is coming from, it's all from the same sources. It's index pricing, where they show exactly what indice they're pulling from that given month, and then our city sanitation supervisor has that exact same resource. He's going to, it's funny, one of the major ones is recyclingmarkets.net. We have a subscription. He logs right in and he's checking to make sure, yep, the pricing is matching up. But it doesn't matter if it's LRS, Groot, Resource Management. Generally in a given month, that market pricing is holding true. And then you arrive at that net cost per ton. Again, the difference that the city's paying, and using the LRS example, they're charging us $84 a ton. It's worth $50. That's our net fee of $34. But there's also some really good news to share with this update as well, in the terms of some what we think is some significant operating budget savings towards recycle processing. And if I can highlight the chart very briefly, last 3 fiscal years, you're seeing the budgeted amounts, FY 23, 24, 170, FY 25, 200,000. And then if you look at those actuals in 23 and 24, they're very, very high. FY 25, we're actually under budget, but that actually stems back to Resource Management letting us know in December that they were pivoting, moving out, and through our existing agreement with them, they set us up to begin to work with LRS, Direct Haul. It was kind of a pass-through, but it was a great opportunity for us to experience that, MRF, for our staff. And where the savings actually really lie is not on that processing fee or the market index pricing. It's much more has to do with an operational item. Trucking, if you recall back at the front end of the slide, that whole process of 4 times a week, Resource Management, dropping off a trailer, picking it up, that process, simply put, is going to be eliminated. We are now going to direct haul to LRS. Their MRF is located in Northbrook, about a half hour away. That same time, it was taking the employee at the end of the route to load up the Resource Management truck to drive to Northbrook and back. It's equal, it's negligible. So we're very excited about this direct haul opportunity to eliminate that very costly trucking fee. And where it came from for us as we were looking at averages and the numbers, we believe we can propose a budget, an annual budget of $130,000, which in a given year, looking at some of those actual budgets, the true costs, it's about $100,000 less. And that's something we're going to analyze every year, but there's a real opportunity there with budget savings by eliminating that trucking fee and direct hauling to Northbrook. And so with that, I know I covered a lot of information pretty quickly. I'd be happy to take any questions, but our staff request this evening is for City Council to approve that 5-year recycling materials processing agreement with Lakeshore Recycling Systems in the amount of $650,000.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions? John.
Just a quick comment. Jim, thanks for the information. As part of my onboarding process over the last 2 years, I know we've had this conversation, as you've educated me, and Mike Thomas, the same thing. And if I'm not mistaken, you guys kind of foreshadowed that we thought or hoping there was going to be an operational efficiency here. So, the fact that we're able to change that process and cut a step out that is labor intensive, if not inconvenient, I think is fantastic. So thanks for the work, and I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing nobody at the dais, anyone in attendance with the public who would like to address any questions? Please come on forward. You can come to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Hi, Positive Polly here. Just a couple quick questions. It doesn't seem like this is going to change any of our behavior as far as scheduling when we put out our recyclables, and will it also change? It doesn't sound, since they've been using this company, that it will change what we put out.
That's correct.
Correct? So you know what? It's transparent, other than we're going to save some money potentially.
Well said, absolutely.
Thank you. That's it.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Jim.
And I will, just before council considers action, give my kudos and applause to the Public Works staff for the financial savings that this initiative will realize for the city. I know we don't always do a great job highlighting at some of these meetings ongoing efforts to to find and realize those organizational efficiencies and savings. I think the council recalls last year with health insurance, that was another example of the city saving hundreds of thousands of dollars without materially changing service levels, in that case internal. But again, just a great job by Public Works. The public, as was just asked, will see no change in their services, but another way for us to save money and reallocate those resources somewhere else.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, with no other further questions, do I hear a motion to approve the recommendation from the Public Works Committee to waive the public bid process and approve a 5-year recycling material processing agreement with Lakeshore Recycling Systems for the sum of $650,000?
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
A roll call vote. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Joyce?
Alderman Clem.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Powers.
Aye.
Alderman Levert.
Aye.
Alderman Weber.
Aye.
Alderman Walther.
Aye.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, next item on our agenda is our omnibus vote for consideration. I will read them in order. Once I get through the list, if anyone has anything they'd like to remove or have further discussion on, let me know at that time. Item number 1, approval of the May 19th, 2025 City Council meeting minutes. Number 2, approval of the June 2nd, 2025 City Council meeting minutes. Item number 3, consideration to amend the approved 2025 regular meeting schedule for the Lake Forest City Council. Item number 4, consideration of an ordinance amending the City of Lake Forest City Code regarding the Class D1 liquor license, first reading, and if appropriate, final approval. Item number 5, approval of a contract with Camp Nagila Midwest, doing business as Camp Henry Horner, in the amount not to exceed $37,000. Item number 6, approval of a recommendation from the Public Works Committee to award a bid for the Recreation Center rooftop HVAC unit replacement project to Cahill Heating in the amount of $34,450 to include a 10% contingency in the amount of $3,500 for a total cost of $38,950. Item number 7, approval of a recommendation from the Public Works Committee to award a bid extension to MK Industries for a 1-year HVAC preventative maintenance contract in the amount of $63,855. Item number 8, approval to waive the bid process and approve a purchase of a used 2004 1250 kW Caterpillar mechanical model generator from Ravelin Northfield GP LLC in the amount of $100,000. And that is it. Are there any items anyone would like to discuss further or take out? Alderman Weber.
Item number 2, I had brought to our city clerk's attention. There is a one correction under the adjournment section in the meeting minutes from January 1st. It states Mayor Tack asked for a motion to adjourn, and he was not present at that meeting.
Okay, thank you. With that clarification, do I hear a, let's see this. Oh, Pete, yep.
For the minutes for May 19th, specifically Building Review Committee, and new board member Chris Collins is in Ward 2.
Thank you, Pete. All right. Any other comments? Good catches. Thank you. Okay, with those adjustments to each of their respective omnibus agenda items, do I hear a motion to approve the 8 omnibus items as presented and amended as discussed?
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote, Joyce. Third time was the charm.
Alderman Powers.
Aye.
Alderman Levert.
Aye.
Alderman Weber.
Aye.
Alderman Walther.
Aye.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Clemmons.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is old business, of which there isn't any. Item number 7 is new business, and there is no new business tonight either. Agenda item number 8, items for additional discussion or comments by council members. And anybody have anything they'd like to share? Alderman Powers.
2 quick comments. First of all, we'd be remiss in not recognizing the Lake Forest High School men's lacrosse team that just won their 2nd state championship in a row, beating New Trier last week, which I think is fantastic. And that program's obviously got a ton of momentum. And the boys, the whole team does a fabulous job. So next year we're going for 3 in a row. And then our esteemed colleague, Alderman Weber, just recently won the esteemed alumni award from the School of St. Mary. So from one Crusader to another, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you, Alderman Powers. Anything else from the council? All right, seeing nothing, I'll ask anyone in attendance again for the opportunity to address the city council. I don't see anybody. So with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.